There we go. Okay, John.
Okay, well, welcome to the 2022 Kings Washington Area Alumni Club's Career Day program. My name is John Wetterow, and I'll be your host tonight for this program. And I'm a member of the King's College class of 1970. I'm also a proud member of the King's College Washington Area Alumni Club Executive Committee, known as KWAC, KWAC, is pretty much what everybody calls us. And I'm happy to welcome you, each of you here. We got students on the line, we got presenters, we got alumni, we have friends, and we have King staff to our second virtual KWAC Career Day program. KWAC Career Day is traditionally hosted here in the Washington, D.C. area by the KWAC Executive Committee. For many years, this exciting program has provided a wide range of professional opportunities to King students, thanks to the generosity of many King's D.C. area alumni and friends, many of whom are presenting and or observing sessions this year. If you haven't already, please be sure to mute yourself while our presenters are speaking. There will be time for questions and answers, so save your questions for that time. And when you do have a question, feel free to unmute and ask it, or in the meantime, you can put your question into the chat feature of the program. We've had 6 terrific sessions scheduled for this year. We had 2 last night, we have 2 scheduled tonight, and we have 2 for tomorrow night. This session is called Careers in Government Contracting in the Washington, D.C. area and beyond. And to begin with, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this, and that is Ed Rinkavage. Ed is a 1980 graduate of King's, and he's also on the KWAC Executive Committee. Let me turn it over to Ed. It's all yours.
Hey, John, thank you so much. And thank you folks for attending today. You know, the goal here of our presentation and our guest speakers is to supplement what you heard last night from Jeremy and his group talking about opportunities, you know, in the federal government as federal employees. And what we're going to focus on today and our experts are a supplement to federal employment, which is careers in an area called GOVCON, or government contracting. And so our speakers, Hans Jaeger and Frank, are both experts in industry in the Washington, D.C. area, as well as in government contracting. And I'll introduce the speakers in just a minute. So there's a whole variety of opportunity in the DC area other than just looking for a job. You know, I want you to be aware that there's different markets that you can solicit or seek out as you're looking for, you know, new job opportunities after graduation. And so I'm going to go through a list of those, as well as what we call verticals. And then you'll see a little bit more about, you know, what those opportunities really shape up to be. And one of the topics or questions last night was about, you know, picking a job, you know. And, you know, one of the things I've always defaulted to was passion. And so as, you know, you look at the different jobs that are available, I think one of the things you have to do is find out what your passion is. You know, is your passion the environment? Is it the sciences? You know, is it healthcare? You know, just go through the list. Could be politics. And then once you find out what your passion is, that's going to help you start to kind of hone down what you think you might want as far as your next job. And folks like, you know, Hans and Frank will be able to, you know, help you through that decision-making process. The other thing I want to just kind of remind you about before we go too much further is that, you know, between these 3 sessions or these 3 nights, yesterday, tonight, tomorrow, you've got some awesome speakers with unbelievable success in their background. And I would really, really encourage you to reach out to them either now or after the, you know, the career fair, and ask them questions. You know, someone like Frank, as an example, oh my gosh, retired Marine, senior executive of a political appointee, an acquisition executive. I mean, he's done it all, and he's going to talk about it. And interestingly, you know, he's got his degree from Catholic University in the DC area. But he has a good perspective on all the markets. And Hans, who's been in the market since 1995, is a co-owner of his own company and has a lot of good background in the various markets as well. So I think you're going to get a good view on what our folks can really offer you. So take advantage, email them afterwards, and seek out their advice. It's really going to help. And so let me just introduce Hans first, and then I'll introduce Frank, and then go through a couple introductory slides. But Hans is a 1993 graduate of Frostburg State and a 2022 master's candidate from Johns Hopkins University. Hans has about 18 years experience co-owning and partner in a company called YRCI, which is a professional services training and management consulting firm providing HR, financial, and acquisition services. I've known Hans since about, I think it was 2002 or 2001 we first met. And, from that point onward, I've consistently been impressed, with what he does, how he, manages business, his ability, to attract and retain some outstanding talent. And he'll talk to you about that process tonight. And I'd like to also introduce Frank Spampinato, who is just as impressive as Hans with his background. You can see he's a Juris Doctorate degree from Catholic University, Doctorate of Public Administration from the University of Southern California, Master's, graduate of Central Michigan, and so forth. So very, very well educated and versed. He's also, by the way, a professional mentor. So if that doesn't send a signal, not too much does. But Frank's last position was the former associate administrator of the Small Business Administration. He's been a program manager, a private company owner, director of acquisition services, chief procurement officer. The chief procurement officers, the acquisition officers, they make it happen for the government. So when we talk about, the 300,000-400,000 jobs, associated with the federal government, it's folks like Frank that make that happen through the contracting process. And so Frank's going to talk a little bit about that as well, so you get to understand it a little bit more, which is just a little bit more of the diversity of the DC market. So once we introduce everybody, I want to just highlight some economic sectors and demographics from the DC area, just to give you something to start thinking about. And then some targets of opportunity for you when you start seeking out your jobs, including the different horizontal markets that are common to the DC area. And I'm going to show you some hot jobs that I downloaded yesterday. They're new opportunities, and there's thousands of them in the DC area. They're not jobs that are being filled like backfills. They're new opportunities. They're new jobs that have surfaced. And like I said, there's thousands of them, and you got to take advantage of that. And then, we'll hear from our experts and then wrap everything up and have a Q&A session. So just to highlight a few things, you heard Jeremy last night focusing on the government market, getting a job as a federal employee and working in the federal government. But that's just one of the many markets that are available in the DC area. We have management consulting, information technology, law enforcement, medical and healthcare, security, education, that are all areas of potential markets, that you can look for jobs. But then there's markets and verticals within themselves just by the mere size. And you have the federal workforce, which Frank will talk a little bit more about. You have state and local. You have government contracting, which is quite significant in the DC area. You have commercial opportunities. You have educational opportunities. These are all separate vertical markets where you see the opportunities in blue that penetrate across all those markets. Financial management, business areas are all potential markets for you to pursue. And so when you look at the DC area, we have 11 economic sectors, and many of these fall into the majors that you have, at King's. So for example, finance, utilities, retail, the food industry, energy, healthcare, the industrial sectors like aerospace, defense, machinery, construction, fabrication, manufacturing, and then technology, telecom, materials like mining and refining and chemicals and forestry and real estate are all the 11 primary sectors in the DC government. So when I say look for your passion, this is where you can start. What is your passion? What would you go to fight about? What would you argue about? That's your passion. And then when we use the term, the greater metropolitan Washington, D.C. area, we don't just mean Washington, D.C. and its 700,000 citizens. What we're referring to is a much bigger area that totals over 6 million people. That includes Washington, D.C. proper and the surrounding areas of Arlington, Virginia, Alexandria, Reston, Frederick, Maryland, Gaithersburg, Maryland, Rockville, Bethesda, and Silver Spring. And I know many of you have visited the area, and to get to DC, you have to go through these different towns. But as you look for jobs and opportunities, don't just focus on Washington, DC. As you can see, there's 8 other locations that can absolutely be part of your job hunting experience, with many, many companies available in these areas. And interestingly, for example, Arlington, Virginia has the highest educational rate of any county in America. Almost 70% of the citizens of Arlington, Virginia have master's degree. So that just tells you something about the jobs that are available, the colleges and universities in the area, and the opportunities that that you can pursue in addition to looking for employment. So just to give you a little pitch on DC, I want to give you some demographics. For example, the population of those 9 areas is 6.3 million. And what that represents is about 2.3 million households, which means there's probably about 3 people per household. 50% of the population is married. So if you don't want to get married, you don't want to come to DC, stay away. But that's a joke. And but 50% is married. From an educational perspective, 51% have college degrees and 25% have master's degrees. Veterans represent about 8% of the population. And hold on to your seats, the average real estate cost is $450,000. The total geographic area represents about 6,600 square miles, which represents 960 people per square mile. The average age is 37. Unfortunately, I'm past that. The average income is $105,000, and the average commute is about 35 minutes. Now, with telecommuting, which you heard about last night from OPM, and other companies that encourage telecommuting, your average commute is going to be from your bedroom to the kitchen, to wherever your laptop rests. So it might be 2 minutes instead of 35 minutes. But we're going to talk a little bit about telecommuting as well. So it's a very dynamic area. It's growth oriented. It's the heartbeat of America. And, as many people will often say is, our local news is world news. Now, just a few of the hot jobs in the area, web developers, software developers, opticians, hardware engineers, nursing, system security technicians. And then these specifically came out of the hot market job site this morning. And look at the number of openings in each of these areas, and look at the salaries, the degree requirements. Holy smokes, accountants and auditors, 1,000 new positions with the average salary being $103,000. If you're an economics major, if there's 939 new positions, Now, most of them do require a master's degree, but again, these jobs are right in line with your majors, at King's. And again, these are not backfills. These are new positions. Construction, paralegals, registered nurses, computer network and network engineers, editors, market research analysts, sales reps, architects, designers, the list is going on. And then lastly, just a few more to emphasize, budget analysts, again, right in line with your accounting degrees, computer programmers, technical writers, nurses, training development specialists, instructional coordinators, all giving you different opportunities with some of these hot jobs. So just a few things to think about. We talked about internships yesterday, some of the opportunities in the federal government. Now, these are some of the opportunities, just within industry in the DC area. So the first person, I'd like to introduce is Dr. Frank Spampinato. He is a well-known individual throughout the government contracting community. He's been in our business for several decades, and Frank is just a dynamic individual, well-known, and a certified mentor, hint, hint. So Frank, with that, it's all yours. And whenever you want me to flip the slide to your topics, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you, Ed. I really appreciate it. Well, I just realized something from Ed's slide that I am completely blowing the average age in this area. So I am on the far right of the spectrum in the age category. But yeah, when I came down here, I was probably 32 years old. So that's about right. But anyway, I wanted to kind of give you a little more of a kind of a personal perspective on government contracting. I'm sure all of you out there, if I asked for raised hands, how many of you actually dreamed before you went off to college or after you graduated that you wanted to be a contracting officer someday? That would probably be a very limited number of hands. And I would be in the same ballpark. I mean, I was a business major when I went to school, and of course, I enlisted in the Marine Corps, got out of the Marine Corps, decided public service was for me, and came to the federal government. And of course, my first job was CIA, and I thought, wow, I can do spy stuff, right? I'm going to be in the CIA. But then they kind of gave me a choice, and with my competencies and my not so competencies, they said, look, we got a couple of career fields for you. You can either be a logistics officer or a contracting officer. And they said they would give me 6 months to do both, to give me an opportunity to see which one I liked. And once I started to do government contracting, I fell in love with it. Because the opportunities, I mean, I'm just going to go through some things that I've done and I've been able to do over my career. And it's not because I'm just this super person, but it's because opportunities were there. And when opportunities come up, you have to go for them. And I've done so many things. I've worked on big programs. What I wanted to say, first of all, you got to understand between the government has, several hundred thousand, maybe millions of people throughout the U.S. work for the government. But there are still skills that need to be found out there in the contractor world. So there was a big contractor contingent, very large, who works with the government. So as the contracting officer, you are the critical connection, the link between the private sector and the government. Okay, acting as an agent, agent not in the sense of CIA, but agent, in terms of agency law, working on the part of the government for the public good with contractors. And so I found that to be, it's a huge responsibility, and it's very highly trained skill. I mean, I have been trained like you would not believe. That's That's why I'm a subject matter expert, because they have trained me for the last 30 years. If you have a strong bent toward business and legal and public service, you're going to love contracting. And let me just say, like I said before, some of the things that I've been able to do. I mean, I've been on teams that built satellites. I've been with teams that have built an entire $370 million headquarters. Of course, you couldn't pay that for it today, but $370 million, and that was quite a long time ago, 20 some years ago. I have, there was years and years ago, there was a terrorist attack at CIA headquarters, and I was involved with security and getting additional security for the premises. So, it's not like you're just going out as a CO and buying stuff or buying services. You are involved in programs that affect the world, affect the warfighter. I mean, you could be in the Department of Defense and even in the CIA. I mean, I was cleared into programs that maybe only a handful of people in the world were cleared into. So you are doing some good, neat things. You're not just buying, selling, you're not buying and negotiating. You're doing all that stuff. But as an operational contracting officer, you are involved in these programs with your team. You have the contracting officer representative who is a technical person, a program manager. You have security people, you have legal people, you have finance people. So all these people are on your team, and you help them achieve great things. And that was part of the reason why, after about 17 years at the CIA, I moved into the open world, you might want to say, Department of Energy, transportation, and small business, and FEMA, because I wanted to do good things. FEMA, I got to support response to Hurricane Sandy. At the Small Business Administration, I got to, as a contracting person, I was able to participate during the pandemic and helping businesses, small businesses, get certified throughout the pandemic. And it's like Ed said, pursue your passion. You can find your passion anywhere in the government as a contracting officer, because, like I said, you can go to the SBA if your passion is small business. You can go to FEMA if your passion is disaster response, emergency response. You can go to energy if your passion is, okay, let's find out about this energy crisis. What's going on? Why are we in a position we're in? You get to do all of these things, okay? So that's number one. That's operational contracting. And second of all, I just wanted to say a short word about, if you want to be a leader, you have to choose to lead. The government, I'm telling you, I have been in the government 30 years. The government is dying for good leaders. There are too many people, and it's not everybody, but there is a good number of people who go along to get along. Okay, you have to be a leader. We need leaders. We need people that will take the hard decisions and let the chips fall where they may. You work, you build coalitions, you collaborate, but at the end of the day, as an executive, and if you have chosen to lead, you have to take that decision, whether it's popular or not. And we need people, we need leaders, whether you're in government contracting, or whether you're in some other field, whether you're an engineer or whatever you do, a finance person. We need leaders, okay? And we need, people think that they cannot lead until they have people. You start leading the day that you come into the government. When you conduct, the way you conduct yourself, you have to lead yourself well before you can become a leader of people. And people will see that. You're the person who takes on the hard work. You're the person that stays late. You're the person that comes in early. You're the person that helps people out when they need help. they're going to see that you're the lead, and that's the way you start it. Okay, you start to be the leader. Don't wait until somebody taps you on the shoulder and says you're the leader, because that's what happens. Also, I've also seen that people have been in contracting, they become terribly proficient in the contracting world, and they say, you know what, you're such a good contracting officer, we're going to put you in charge. And then it's like, wait a minute. And a lot of people are not ready to be put in charge. So what I like to say is, there's an old saying, when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare, right? So if you have any inkling that you want to lead and you want to be a leader, start working on your leadership from day one. Like I said, start working as you lead yourself, and then you will be that leader that will be highly respected and well known in government. And quickly, I'd like to, I mentioned a hybrid model here, which something else I'd like to tell you about government contracting. I think it's very valuable to, if you can do this, especially when you're in your early career, take a couple of years, work in the in industry, work for a contractor for a couple of years, go to the government. You can go back and forth, okay? And the civil service system is kind of amenable to that, the new system. You can go back and forth a little bit, because what happens is there is a lot of, we talk past each other, government and private sector. So if you get a little bit of business and you know that, you know, what's done on the business side, that will help you in the government. And so the last thing I want to tell you is, I don't want to take up too much time because I know there's some good stuff coming. Where do you go? Of course, you can always, you have my contact information. And I tell people, you can always send me an email, give me a call. Anyway, I mean, I will help you any way I can, because we need good young people in the government. You can go to usajobs.gov, good place, CIA.gov. And I know CIA specifically right now is looking for entry-level contracting officers. They've got a high need. So CIA.gov is a good one. Another one is FAA.gov. You can go there, or you can send me, you know, I've worked at these organizations too. So you can just send me an email and I will help you contact the right people. But I just want to say, you know, I've been a CO for 30 years in some way or another, either as an operational CO or as an executive. And I love being a contracting officer. I've got to, you know, I've got to go to the Hill and testify on Capitol Hill in front of Congress. I've done a lot of things that I've really been fortunate to be able to do. So contracting is a great thing. If you ever want to send me an email and ask me how great it is, I will definitely tell you. So thank you.
Okay, Frank, thank you so much for that, for all that insight. Sure. And now what we're going to do is kind of transition, you know, as Frank talked about the contracting arena, awarding the contracts on behalf of the government. He awarded contracts to companies like YRCI, which is where Hans comes in. He's been a business owner now for about almost 20 years, working in that government contracting sector, performing IT services, HR services, training, and other things. So I'd like to introduce Hans Jaeger to the discussion. And Hans, take it away.
Good evening, Ed, and everybody on the call tonight. This is a lot of fun for me. And I don't think I'll focus too much on the slides, but I'll use that as a little bit of a guide, and I'll let Rose know when I'm ready to move on. But it's easy for me to reflect back to the position that some of you may be at today, thinking, what's that right job? I've got some level of studies that I'm excelling at, and I'm graduating with something I may be passionate about, but I'm still not certain whether I've had many internships. But how does that translate to my career? What are those first steps? What am I going to like or dislike? And I have to say, it took me maybe 30 years to figure it out. I'm still working on it, still trying to figure out what I enjoy doing the most. Like Frank, maybe even Ed, my early studies were began at Loyola, but finished at Frostburg because of my athletics, and was in accounting and marketing. But I also had a passion for global studies, for history, for archaeology. So I set off on a path of interdisciplinary studies, both at the University of Maryland, where I began in my studies of geography, foreign investment, Russia, onto archaeology, working on programs throughout the world. Even went so far as to climb a bunch of mountains, spend years overseas. Spent about a year in Africa in the mid 1994. It was a pretty transformational time. And I continued to think about what's my career journey look like. And that really was because I had a lot of different interests, a lot of different passionate things I was doing. I worked for the National Geographic Society. I made films. I was studying underwater archaeology, had a passion for the environment, which led me to my studies in environmental science at Hopkins. But I still couldn't translate what my career would look like. Flashpoint was a booming IT sector in the DC region and worldwide in the late 90s, which was of great interest as well. But how could I culminate these different areas of interest, different levels of study and growing expertise in a job? It's really hard for me to figure that out. And I think a lot of that had to do with my limited exposure, and I hadn't tried enough things when it came to what a career field looked like. And I was a little hesitant to be an auditor or an accountant in a firm. I thought, well, that's how do I spread my wings? How am I going to see a broader industrial base, a broader level of impact? You know, how am I really going to have an impact? I also wanted to make money. And I found in my graduate studies, I looked at some of the folks, the policy experts or the lawyers or the scientists, and I thought, well, how do I live? How do I feed my daughter that was on the way in these career fields? You know, what is going to be the best path? And since then, my passion has really been build the next generation of workforce that not only supports my business, but it supports the public sector market that I serve and have served now for nearly 18 years at YRCI. And so DC is made up of obviously a big emphasis in the public sector marketplace. There are 2.4 million federal employees. If you add defense to that and the defense uniform services, you're over 4 million. That's a pretty big impact on our country and our world. And here in DC, it is very centric on that, on the federal government. But now, as you know, our workforce is becoming much more dispersed, and a larger population even is internationally. I'm firmly embedded in this professional services and management consultancy area, which is the service-driven economy of knowledge-based workers. It's a $1 trillion plus global industry worldwide. This GOVCON focus is very significant, not only worldwide, but here in the US in particular. There is a great push from manufacturing-based world that we have lived in into much more high tech and also much more service and people-driven knowledge-based services. But how does that translate to a career when things are moving so fast, and how IT and the information technology landscape and 7 of the largest companies equal the value of 500 of the largest companies in the world? Those are IT-centric companies. That's a significant, a very significant thing to try to figure out. So when thinking about professional service organizations, it's the professional services and management consulting that bring services to the government. It brings it to other business partners. And usually that's because the organization doesn't have that specific talent, or they have special projects that are above and beyond the talent that is derived within the organization. And that can cross many of the functional areas that you're interested in, where your studies are. And so in my organization, I have a responsibility for leadership, the vision, strategy, and culture of the business, but also leading the client relationship aspects. And you can translate anything in professional services to citizen service as well. The services that are provided from the public sector across all the domains. And I have the luxury of being able to touch on so many of those different elements of the public service. At YRCI, our core offering that leads the day is both in human capital, talent acquisition, and learning, even more so than the other management consulting areas. So every year on behalf of the government, we assist in more than 5,000 hires. And typically in those mission critical occupations, the ones that are most important to the agencies themselves. And those jobs are quite unique across the different agencies. So my Department of Agriculture clients, they're looking for their research scientists around agriculture, whether it's in crops or in animals. If you're looking at the Department of Commerce, we're looking for economists. We're looking for folks that support NOAA and the Weather Service and fisheries. If you're considering the Department of Energy, we're looking for nuclear scientists. If you're thinking about Department of Justice and Homeland Security, you can think about the different positions that are STEM across all of those departments. But there is certainly a big emphasis on the STEM careers. But when I think about the many things we do, it's often in management support. So that's in your human resources, in your accounting and finance and budget. It's also in some of the technology services as well, but not strictly in STEM. What I find fascinating now that we're helping the government hire more than 100,000 people, and I myself hire a couple hundred people each year. We build human capital specialists from scratch in learning programs, whether they're just coming out of university or transitioning careers. We're teaching how to be a human capital specialist in the federal sector, which is highly regulated. So it's not as free-flowing as you might find in industry in terms of hiring practices. There's reform being generated, but for the right reasons. When I think about the career fields that are predominant in our in industry and in the public sector, they're going to be wildly different in the next 5 or 10 years because of the impact on technology. And so that's one thing that I think is a standout that has resonated with me the most. It's one of the biggest movements in the way we work, how we work. Regardless of your focus and passion and interest, in every one of the functional areas across the public sector and in industry, it's going to be driven on how we work. So Ed, if you would, go to the next slide. Why do I want to talk about something so specific as low-code development? And the reason I want to talk about it is that it is quite evident that in many career areas, robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, or machine learning, the significant technology behind the scenes is changing how we work, regardless of career field. When Frank speaks about being a leader, leaders often from within are developing solutions. So I teach our professionals that we're problem solvers. Regardless of our functional expertise, we're problem solvers across the areas of the company that we're involved in. We're collaborative in that we're problem solvers. We're trying to identify the problems that will improve the business process or the solutions that, you know, the true mission responsibility that we have within our business or within the public sector. And what's occurred is that there's an idea that you don't have to be an IT specialist. And boy, there's a need for that in cyber technology specialists and really highly functional technical experts. But what we're finding that in many areas that you can become a business technologist. If you begin to learn to use the applications and the design studios, you can create business solutions. So today you may be able to function on data analysis, business intelligence, or be an expert at, say, the Microsoft suite with Excel and be really good at preparing presentations. But the next level is revising business processes by using these low code or no code environments to create business solutions in any environment. You may be in a high-tech environment or in a scientific environment or in law enforcement or in healthcare. Each one of these environments has the ability to have a great impact from low code. So if I became an accountant, or if I went into budget, or if I went into any one of those other career fields, I may be able to create solutions of problems in the simplest environments of business process. Imagine a contact center, inefficiencies gained when you're being served as a citizen or being served as a beneficiary of the service you bought. Those are the areas where solutions can be found. And why does it matter? Gartner just said that because of this impact on technology, there's going to be 85 million jobs displaced, but 97 million created. You're thinking about a massive shift in how we work because of technology, regardless of your functional space. That's where you can become a leader. And when we talk about citizen development, it means that you can develop technology and if you're not a technologist. And I think that was one of the biggest impacts that has stood out for me in the way we're evolving as a company, how our clients are evolving, and how the modern management consulting or professional service organizations are evolving. And I think that just leads me to the idea of, I just wish I had known more about what management consulting and other professional services, or an ability to be a problem solver in any environment. I would probably have been able to figure out how I'd meet mission, vision, how I would meet the things that I was passionate about at the same time from a business professional standpoint, and actually make some money from it, which meant got to try some new things, dive in head first. You probably heard about the Pathways programs last night or other career fields which have formal training and evolution and rotational assignments. There's going to be great hiring surges that are happening right now that Ed pointed out earlier. I'd be excited. I wish I knew this much then, just a couple of years ago, that I know now. I would really have had a chance to understand the economics and the different business opportunities that exist that do today. So I'm so glad to share some of that with you. And as Frank mentioned, my contact information is being provided. Would happy to be a mentor or provide guidance to anyone on today's call. So thank you very much.
Awesome, Hans. Thank you. Sitting back listening to, Frank and yourself, I just feel like, wow, I'm overwhelmed, with all the opportunity that's down here, in the DC area. And, when you look at the 400,000 federal employees that make up the greater Washington, DC area, there's 800,000 contractors that support the federal government. So folks like Frank that award the contracts and folks like Hans that execute those contracts, that's another 800,000 positions. And you saw earlier the thousands of positions that are available, throughout the government. So whatever your passion is, man, you got to look up the DC area because all these things are available to you. And again, as Frank and Hans mentioned, it's all about your passion. Find out what you really like in life, and pursue it, because that will make your job so much more enjoyable. The last thing you want to be known as is a jumper. You go work for one company for 6 months, you go to work for another company for 6 months. You don't want to do that. That's jumping, and that's not really favorable to your next employer. So look at your passion, find out what you really like, what you want to do. Use the folks from yesterday, and Hans is correct. We talked about the Pathways program. Jeremy talked about, federal employment. And now Frank's talking about, professions in contracting. Hans talking about industry. Pursue those alternatives, do something different. But most importantly, you have to network. Networking is so important, anything you do. I teach at American University, and but it's adult learning, and it's still about networking. Even as adults, we have to network, to gain advantages in our profession. So join those associations that, again, Jeremy spoke about last night. Get networked, get involved, and become active. And a lot of it you can just do virtually. You don't have to be in person. Take advantage of these career days and your speakers, and don't be afraid about COVID, because hiring is better than ever. Usually through telecommuting, and again, you heard the OPM folks talk about that last night. But whether you're working for industry, working for the government, There's a ton of opportunities in the DC area, and we're all here to help you. And you'd be surprised the fun that you're eventually, going to have. You might have to give up your Eagles tickets or your Phillies tickets to become a Nats fan or a Commanders fan, but I think you can do that and still be pretty successful. So with that, we want to thank you for your listening in today. And if anyone has any questions, the floor is open for you.
Yeah, so if any students have questions, you can unmute yourself at this time to ask them. You can put them in the chat. And I also have a few that were submitted beforehand if we don't have any takers just yet. Well, one of the questions that we got from a student during pre-registration, it was curious about starting salary for a government contractor.
Hans, you want to take that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. It's certainly still a focus on what general experience or specific competency and skill you may have or the particular functional position, but the equivalency of the public sector position might be a GS 5, 7, or 9, depending on your level of education. So we don't see, much less than $20 an hour for any starting salary. We're also seeing a pretty rapid accession in career fields and with some functional training in on-the-job experience and certification. And so there's a pretty good track that is mirrored even in industry to the public sector equivalency. So if you think about someone in finance, someone in contracting, human capital, you see a pretty rapid accession. I used to like to say it's, you should be able to do 6 figures in 6 years, if not faster. But also there's the greater demand in STEM and the greater demand in the cyber and other technology fields means that very, very specific competencies in specific languages, for instance, can drive capability and value at the project level. And that could mean even greater earnings sooner rather than later. I appreciate Ed's comment about lifelong learning. There's a definitely correlation to that lifelong learning and skill sets in this environment. And that's also another way for rapid accession in salary. And compensation is very, very competitive environments because of the vacancies. So overall packages look for the depth and breadth of benefits, from leave to healthcare to insurance, and other learning opportunities from within the organization that's hiring. And those are going to be, some of the things that round out those packages. That'd be of great importance too.
Yeah, Hans is spot on with that. When I before I sold my company last year, just as an example, there's a big accounting department at King. So when we hired first year financial managers, accounting technicians, auditors, we would go in somewhere around 50,000 or so, maybe 55, but that would be the starting salary. And within 2 to 3 years, your first salary bump is probably close to 65 to 70, and then that third year, you're probably looking at 80, 85,000. And as Hans said, 6 figures in 6 years is usually where you're at, especially in in the DC area. So, and as we're pretty consistent across all the markets and all the sectors, 50K is not unusual, for a starting point.
Yeah, and the other thing I might add is, of course, this was a long time when I came down here, a long time ago, but I went from New York to DC, and I had to take about probably a little bit of a pay cut, not too much, but I caught up really quickly. And that is the thing about the federal government. There are, as Hans mentioned, there are a lot of positions that are open, and movement, promotion is relatively quickly. So you know, back in the old days when I was in a junior CO, we used to always think that you could make more in the private sector than you could in the government. But I think what happened, we found back then that after a couple of years, you caught up pretty quickly. So it was pretty comparable. So just my experience.
Excellent, thank you. Beth, did you have any others?
Yeah, there was another one. It's kind of a similar, but just some student asked for us to expand on some potential government contracting jobs that would be particularly suited for new graduates.
Wow, I'll touch on that a little bit, and then Hans, if you can jump on that as well. But you know, we hired a lot of financial management people, business analysts, which was a little bit of a broader category, junior IT personnel. You know, the whole idea of bots is exploding, and bots is a form of artificial intelligence. You know, so if you like the information technology industry, you know, it's the same thing. So, you know, IT, financial management, business analysts are all really big and popular. And as Hans highlighted, you know, he discussed a little bit about STEM positions. Hans, you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the market is ripe for new graduates. It is competitive, but at the same time, there are so many openings, and there's such a, you probably heard it yesterday also, but on the public sector market, there's really a lack of new hires, which are, you know, coming fresh to the public sector. But it's not just age, but they do talk about that there is, you know, the majority of the public sector is a lot older and or a lot closer to retirement. So there's risk in the succession of key mission critical positions across government. I think there's going to be more back and forth, to Frank's point, in the past, and I think that's going to be a great benefit. At YRCI, for ourselves, we're a mid-sized company. We hire a couple hundred people each year. The largest number of hires for us are in human capital, as human resource associates and specialists. And those are definitely positions, whether you're transitioning from one career to another or a recent graduate, undergraduate or graduate. And so we do have some associate students from certain parts of the areas as they start to proceed prior to their original, their graduation date. And it's complemented with a structured career path and training that lasts for a number of years and tied closely with mentors in the career field. So those are big, and I know that is significant across the entire marketplace.
Okay, thanks, Hans.
That's excellent. Thank you. Is just to touch, one of the questions was just to touch a bit on internship opportunities in DC. So this might be for some of the younger students, maybe not seniors, that are on the call that might be thinking of trying to get some experience over the summer in this type of work.
Hans?
Now's the time to be looking for the window for some of the public sector. If you heard about the pathways programs, but the internship programs are accepting their applicants now for the summer. But remember, they're not static till summer. So there are learning opportunities that go on throughout the year. And so folks looking at the Smithsonian or interior and agriculture and commerce, there were fewer hires during COVID, but many of the programs continued. You know, places like State Department and so on. So everybody is pretty eager. What they're also considering doing is a lot more apprentice programs where your possibility of an appointment, even if it's a temporary appointment, which leads to a competitive appointment, is going to be fast tracked. So many of those internship programs, even if you missed, let's say this recent hire or this summer's applicant deadlines, I think they're just thereafter that it could be a path to not a permanent position, but that term is used, but that is a path that we think is going to see a lot of action as hiring authorities or hiring authorities that permit sort of fast track to hiring into certain career fields are adopted. It will see many, many more hires in that fashion. So it shortens that time frame from application to what happened to my application, finally an interview, and then it takes so many, many, many more months to get hired. It's a slow process, public sector, but industry is sort of a way to address that first. And I see many of the big programs, internship programs, cycle in and out throughout the year. So the big name, household name contractors to companies like mine who may do just a handful.
Yeah, and then you look at one of King's long-term partners, through Carney Company. They offer internships every year, and they've been real generous, to King's College. But in the state of Virginia, for example, internships are a little bit of a challenge, because of the way the laws are written. And I don't want to say internships are not plentiful, but internships could be a little bit of a challenge, to uncover. I don't want to lead you down the path that says, internships are readily available. That's not necessarily the case. And so if you want an internship, you need to really start digging now and, and see what's out there that you can get placed on for next year. And, Carney Company is one of those, as well as some of the other bigs. The Booz Allens, Ernst & Youngs, and Accentures, and KPMGs, and Deloitte's, and all those others, do have internships, but they're competitive, and you have to start now, looking. So it's definitely an option.
Okay, I'm going to take this time now to thank Ed, Hans, and Frank for their insight to the careers in government contracting and everything else in the DC area. We got a lot of good stuff from them, and of course the contact information for all three is on your screen right now. I also want to take this time to do a commercial to say that we have 3 more sessions left. We have one more tonight at 6:15, which is going to be Making It Happen, Graduate or Law School While Working Full-Time, a story of work and life balance. That's at 6:15 tonight. And then, of course, we have 2 sessions tomorrow. We have one at 5 o'clock tomorrow, which is Healthcare Career Opportunities in the greater Washington, DC area. And at 6:15 tomorrow, our last session is how recent federal legislation to rebuild our infrastructure and meet the competitive challenge from China will create millions of good jobs in America. So 3 more excellent sessions that are coming up for students and alumni or anybody else, staff, whoever is interested in attending. So with that, I want to thank everybody and look forward to seeing some of you on the next 3 sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, John.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Ed.
much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great
Students,
job.
you can join us on the next
Thank
session
you.
on Handshake. Head on
Thank
over.
you.